Hello, my name is David Allen and I am the chairman of the Provincial Communications Committee. Today we are launching a series of interviews called Spotlight On, where we hope to speak to members of the executive and others who are performing key roles in the running of the province, so that you, the member, will understand how much work goes into the Middlesex Masonic machine. Today, we are fortunate to start the series with an interview with the Pro Provincial Grand Master and Grand Superintendent, Peter Baker. Hello, Peter. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us today and giving your time to answer some questions on your role in being the senior member of the province. So, starting with the first question, Peter, tell us something about yourself, e.g. where you were born, raised, and your profession.
Well, I'm a Middlesex man through and through. I was born in Ealing, which is in the old county of Middlesex, and I lived there for the first 20 years or so of my life. And I originally went to school in Ealing, and then to secondary school in West Kensington. After I left school at the age of 17, I became an indentured student quantity surveyor, and I attended what was then Willesden Technical College, I think it's now the College of North West London, where I trained and qualified as a chartered surveyor and also a year later as a chartered builder. And then after that I worked for some 34 years for Taylor Woodrow Construction until 1999, when I left and became a self-employed construction contracts consultant and dispute resolution consultant, and also an expert quantum witness, which I did for some 11 or 12 years before I finally retired.
Outside of Freemasonry, can you tell us something about your personal life and interests?
Well, I'm married to Sarah, my wife. We've been married now for 48 years. And we have 2 adult children, and between them they have got 3 grandchildren, 2 girls, 15 and 12. They belong to my daughter. And my son has 2 boys, aged 6 and 3, and a baby girl aged 9 months now. So a lot revolves around family life. But outside of that, as regards sort of hobbies and interests, I played rugby for many years, and I played at the senior rugby level for about 18 years, including playing for Middlesex County RFU, which was included the side that toured British Columbia in 1970. That was captained by JPR Williams, the London Welsh and Welsh International, which was great fun. I stopped playing when I was about 1986-87, and I refereed at club level for about 14 years after that. And I'm now an armchair spectator of rugby. Apart from that, my current sort of interests, I'm very interested in shooting, many aspects, clay game, target rifle, sporting rifle. And I'm also involved in my livery company, the Worshipful Company of Plasterers. And I was master of the livery in 2011-12, which the latter year was the Queen's Diamond Jubilee year, which was an interesting one in the city. And I'm currently still on the Court of Assistants and the managing trustee and the company's charity steward of the Plasterers charity. Apart from that, Sarah and I enjoy opera. I enjoy music in particular, especially choral music and particularly church music. And for a while I played the French horn when I was younger. and I got up to a reasonable standard. I think I got up to about grade 8 as it was then. But in my early 20s, I had to make a decision whether to carry on playing the French horn or playing rugby, and I'm afraid the latter one.
So how were you introduced to Freemasonry?
Well, my wife Sarah's father, my late father-in-law, was a Middlesex Mason, and when we were courting and before we got married, he invited us to various ladies' nights, as they were very popular in those days. And through him, I met a lot of his Masonic friends, and that sparked an interest. But I also found, when playing rugby, that I discovered a lot of the members of my alma mater and the Old Pauline Rugby Football Club were also Masons, and I discovered that the school had a lodge. So in 1975, I joined the school lodge.
So how long have you been a Freemasonry? Although I could probably work that one out myself.
Well, I know arithmetic is not your strong point, David, but it's 45 years. And I joined the Royal Arch in 1979, so that's 41 odd years. And in both cases, I joined in London, not in Middlesex.
Who's been your biggest influence in Freemasonry?
Well, I guess really my late father-in-law, who was in many different orders of Masonry and a Grand Officer in all of them. And in fact, when he died, my mother-in-law said, sort out his regalia, take what you want, get rid of the rest of it. And there was only one piece of regalia that I couldn't identify, but all was revealed later on when somebody phoned me up from one of the rather more obscure orders and asked me if I still had this piece of regalia, to which I said yes, and that enlightened me. But I suppose he was my biggest influence.
Freemasonry brings many things to many people in different ways. What does Freemasonry give to you, and how?
Well, I suppose I've made a lot of friends in Freemasonry. I think it complements my outlook on life, as indeed does my faith. And I think a lot of detractors of Freemasonry come from the aspect of its supposedly religious overtones, which of course it isn't, because we're not allowed to talk about religion or politics. But I certainly see it as complementary to my outlook on life, my faith, and so forth. And I guess that's what I believe it gives me most.
On that basis, what do you most enjoy about Freemasonry?
Well, I think the camaraderie and friendship that you make through Freemasonry. As I said just now, I've made a lot of friends through Masonry who become lifelong friends, and I guess that's one of the aspects of it.
Moving on to more technical matters, why does the Province of Middlesex have a Pro Provincial Grand Master but not a Pro Grand Superintendent?
So in 1982, Prince Michael of Kent was appointed our Provincial Grand Master, and at the time the Deputy Provincial Grand Master was His Honour Alan Trapnell. And in 1987, the late and much beloved Gordon Bourne became Deputy Provincial Grand Master. And during the ensuing 2 years, he negotiated with Grand Lodge, and particularly the Board of General Purposes, on the basis that if Grand Lodge had a Pro Grand Master, why couldn't Middlesex have a Pro Provincial Grand Master? And of course, the Book of Constitutions provides that where a Prince of the Blood Royal is Grand Master or a Provincial Grand Master, then he's entitled to have a Pro. And so in 1989, Gordon Bourne became the first Pro Provincial Grand Master for Middlesex, and I think I'm now number 6. Why there's no Pro Grand Superintendent is that in 1982, when Prince Michael was appointed our Provincial Grand Master, he was also appointed the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Master Masons and the Honourable Fraternity of Royal Ark Mariners. And I guess he probably viewed being our Provincial Grand Master in the craft and also Grand Master in the Mark and the Royal Ark Mariner degree was more than enough to cope with. And so he was never appointed as a Pro Grand Superintendent. So since then, we've always had a Pro Provincial Grand Master who acts for him when he's not available, but we're a double-header province in the sense that I am also the Grand Superintendent.
What we've heard about the titles you hold. What do you see your role is in the province, and what does it entail?
Well, as Pro Provincial Grand Master, obviously I deputise when the Provincial Grand Master is not available, which is most of the time. And obviously in the Royal Arch as Grand Superintendent, I head up that. So effectively, I'm the leader of the craft and the Royal Arch province, and I suppose my main role is to ensure that everything in the province is done in conformity with the edicts of UGLE and Grand Chapter, and complies with the Book of Constitutions, and to lead the province and to try and ensure that everybody enjoys themselves in their masonry.
Do you find this role fulfilling, and in what way, if indeed you do find it fulfilling?
Yes, I do find it fulfilling. It's also very challenging. I was Deputy Provincial Grand Master from 2001 to I think 2010, so I had a good inkling of what was involved. But I have to say that in the intervening period, there's a lot more required of Provincial Grand Masters and Grand Superintendents now than there was then, and it's a much more onerous task. I say task, that's not the right word, it's a much more onerous office, but nonetheless enjoyable, and I do find it fulfilling, and as I say, I do also find it challenging.
Do you find it rewarding?
Most of the time, yes. Occasionally, no. And I'm not going to tell you why.
What do you hope to achieve whilst you're in office?
Middlesex has seen a fall in its membership, like many other provinces, over the past couple of decades. And what do I hope to achieve? Well, I suppose I would hope to try and stabilise the membership and indeed grow it if we can. But COVID-19 has hit us quite hard, and we'll maybe develop a bit more about that in a few moments if you ask me the right questions. But membership is probably one of the key, if not the key, element of concern for me at the moment.
Well, a lot of brethren will be thinking about life after COVID-19. How do you think it will affect the province long term, and indeed Freemasonry?
Well, I think you've got to look at not only the province, but I think you've got to look at United Grand Lodge of England as well, and Masonry as a whole. I think there will be an impact on membership, because I think if you look at our membership statistics, about nearly 60% of our members are over the age of 61. And I think a lot of people are therefore in the higher risk category, as the government would like to schedule us. I think a lot of people will have second thoughts about large meetings, large gatherings, travelling to London for Grand Lodge and that sort of thing. And I think we will see a slight drop in membership. We have had a few resignations already, which are, some of them have been put down to personal matters, but some have been put down to financial matters. And if you look at the individuals and you look up their details on the Adelphi database, you'll see that they're self-employed. So presumably they're either, their income has dropped off, they've been made redundant, they've been furloughed or whatever. So I think we are going to see the effect of COVID-19 on our membership for those two reasons, the sort of financial pressures and also the questions of health and not wanting to attend large meetings.
Not everyone will know what the province has been doing during this pandemic. Would you like to remind us of some of the initiatives which have been taking place?
Well, we've been very active, really, and I don't think we've actually received the sort of recognition that we perhaps would like, but that is being addressed, I know. As you know, this year is the 150th anniversary of the province, and at the beginning of the year, the Middlesex Masonic Charity allocated £50,000 to me to donate to various charities in the province, and with help from the Provincial Grand Charity Stewards in the Craft and the Royal Arch, I decided that we would make donations of £5,000 each to 10 charities in the sort of north, south, east and west of the province, and across a range of charities. And that was very timely with COVID-19, because a lot of these charities suddenly saw their income drop off. So even though it's not a huge amount, £5,000 was a good donation from the Freemasons of Middlesex to keep them going. We've also been doing a lot with the food banks, and the biggest initiative, of course, is the Meals Initiative being run out of the Harrow Centre and the Uxbridge Centre, where we're providing meals to the vulnerable, homeless, the needy and the disadvantaged, in conjunction with the Salvation Army in Hayes, Harlesden and Harrow, and also the Harrow Voluntary Community Sector Forum, and also an organisation called SUFRA, Northwest London, which is primarily linked up with Uxbridge. So we're providing something like 2,500 to 3,000 meals per week out of the kitchens of those two centres, and it's all being done by the furloughed staff who are giving their time freely, and of course our own members. And we've managed to get a grant towards it of £20,000 from the MCF, the Masonic Charitable Foundation, and we also launched the Middlesex COVID Relief Appeal on the website with an initial target of £25,000, which has been extremely well supported by members of the province, and has raised far more than that, which will enable us to do two things. It'll enable us to extend the Meals Initiative to the autumn, when hopefully things will start to improve, and it'll also enable us to do other things. The other thing that we've been doing most recently, which has been done primarily by Citadel Lodge and Circle of Friendship Lodge, is they've been making up little goodie packs for the carers at Prince Michael of Kent Court at Watford, which, as you know, I've been trying to encourage our members to support, as it's named after our Provincial Grand Master. And that has been very well received. And I got a copy of an email this week from the chairman of the Association of Friends, who's delighted with what we've been doing there. And not only supporting the carers, but we've been providing some box of chocolates and other sweeties for the residents, which has gone down very well. So we've been very active and are being very active in the province, and I know there are a number of other initiatives as well.
What activities and achievements do you, as Pro Provincial Grand Master and Grand Superintendent, feel are particularly noteworthy, which have taken place not only officially through the province, but also by members, lodges and chapters since you've been in office, rather than the last 3 months?
Well, of course, the the prime one is the tremendous response that we've had to the 2020 festival, enabled in favour of the Royal Masonic Trust for Girls and Boys. I mean, the total that we achieved of just over 4.5 million was extraordinary for a province of our size, and the highest per capita contribution from our members of just over £1,000, and that in itself was probably the most noteworthy achievement. And I'm just so disappointed that we weren't able to celebrate the end of the festival because COVID-19 and the lockdown restrictions intervened just, 2 weeks beforehand for the planned celebration. And it all seems to have fizzled out, which is disappointing because I think the members of the province haven't really received the recognition that they deserve for their tremendous achievements. Apart from that, I think the members' response to everything that we do has been very good, and particularly their generous support for everything. And I know when going back to the festival, I occasionally have to go to Kensington Palace to brief the Provincial Grand Master on various things. And when I last saw him in the end of November last year and was able to tell him what the current total of the festival was at that time, he looked at me and he said, "I'm always amazed at the generosity of Middlesex Freemasons." And I think that sums it up.
Clearly the 150th anniversary and the end of the 2020 festival celebration had to be cancelled earlier in the year due to the pandemic. Are there any plans for celebrating the festival and this milestone in the province's history at a later date, even if it means during our 151st year?
Well, as you know, I alluded to it just now, we were supposed to have a celebratory dinner for the end of the festival and the 150th anniversary of the province on the 27th of March, which obviously had to be postponed. We did, however, hold a meeting with Burdett Lodge, which was held on the 22nd of January at Cole Court. And Burdett Lodge was created on the morning of Saturday, the 22nd of January, 1870, to do two things. First of all, to enable the then Provincial Grand Master, Colonel Francis de Burdett, to become a member of a Middlesex lodge, which he had to be before he could be installed as our Provincial Grand Master in the afternoon. And so we celebrated in a meeting with Burdett Lodge back in January. But that was only a sort of precursor to what was going to be the main event at the end of March. Because of COVID-19 and the suspension of all Masonic activity, we have provisionally been able to secure a date in September, the 15th of September, which is a Tuesday, when we will be able to celebrate the end of the festival and the 150th anniversary, if it is allowed to go ahead. Plasterers Hall is the biggest livery hall in the City of London, and it can accommodate social distancing. And I'm told just last week that there is a possibility, and it's no more than a possibility, that we might be able to go ahead with that function in September, but it's no more than a possibility. If not, then we will have to review and see if we can do something probably early in 2021. But, you know, as ever, the time has gone, hasn't it? But you can't let it just fizzle out. So we're going to try and do something, but it won't be quite the same, and it won't quite have the same effect. But the Program Master, when he heard of the result of the festival, did email me and said, "I do hope that you will celebrate the end of the festival at an appropriate time in the future." So that was a big hint that we've got to do something. Watch this space.
You clearly enjoy your Freemasonry, and are involved in several other orders at different levels and in different roles. What is it that you find most fulfilling about your membership?
Well, I suppose the variety of the different orders, and going back to my dear late father-in-law, he was the one who got me into most of these things. The one I suppose I enjoyed most was the Ancient Accepted Rite, or Rose Croix, of which I was Inspector General. The structure is different to the craft. You have an Inspector General who's responsible for the district. It's not a province, it's a district. So I ended up being Inspector General for, well, until I was appointed to this current office as ProPGM and Grand Superintendent. So you get an initial 5-year patent, which got renewed twice. They couldn't get rid of me. And I enjoyed that very much, as indeed I do all the other orders that I belong to. And I suppose I'm a person who, if I belong to something, I want to give my most to it. So if I'm not enjoying it, I wouldn't be in these other orders.
Finally, we have seen your wife, Sarah, at quite a few provincial events. How important is her and your family's support to you in your Freemasonry?
Well, obviously it's very important. Without her support, I couldn't do the job I do. She fields the telephone calls and what have you that come in. But she's been well trained because, as I've referred to earlier, her father was a very active Freemason. So, and indeed, she trained as a nurse, a registered nurse at the Royal Masonic Hospital when it was in its heyday. So she's well versed in things Masonic, and quite enjoys coming along to various events and so forth. So she is very supportive, as indeed is the rest of my family. My daughter, when we lived in the northwest of England in Lancashire, she actually went to school at the Royal Masonic School for Girls at Rickmansworth, so she knows obviously something about it. But my son is, he's interested, but as I alluded earlier, with younger people, they have longer working hours, they've got families to look after and so forth, and he simply just doesn't have the time for joining Freemasonry. But their support is important. And I think it's important also for all of us that if we're involved in Freemasonry, we should have our wives, partners and families behind us. And we should try and make them a part of it, which is why social events and that sort of thing are very important.
That concludes the questions that I have for you. Thank you very much.